Here we are starting off at Harmony Borax Works, right outside of Furnace Valley, in Death Valley. Now, a lot of this area and a lot of the trails you'll see today are closed now because of all the flooding they had this year. In fact, I don't think any of the roads that are in this video are open right now, so keep that in mind as we go through the video, that you might not be able to duplicate this exact path. Anyway, this is where they mine the borax, and the borax, it was 162 miles for them to go get water to come and mine. This is the Salt Creek area. The Salt Creek is also closed right now. We saw all different types of lizards in this particular hike, and we went up this hike. This creek supports about 4,000 fish, known as the pup fish. I have not heard the status of whether or not they survived the flooding, because it is a very isolated creek. They have nowhere to go, and if depending upon what happened, they may or may not have hurt their population. These lizards are really fast, by the way. Don't try to catch them. So we took off real early in the morning, so this is all, you're looking at like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning is when we took off. There's some pupfish, by the way. And we hit the Borax Works and then hit this, and then our main goal was to take off for the town of Rhyolite, which you're seeing now, the Bullfrog Rhyolite area. This was a community of almost 10,000 people at one time. And up until, I think, in the 1920s, there was some significant mining going on. And then slowly everything kind of came apart. People started moving away. Our goal for hitting Rhyolite was kind of, because it's the beginning of a trail that we take Red Pass and over to Leadfield, and then through Titus Canyon is our plan for the day. This neat house, built from a man from Australia, built out of bottles, and it's a very interesting house. You can go around and look inside and such, but the whole house was built from bottles from the saloon. And here you can see the inside, some of the peeking through the windows. We went down to the cemetery, which was sort of depressing. There's a few headstones with names that are recognizable. There's a lot of areas in the field that are just mounds where I don't know if the wood headstones burned away in a grass fire or what, but it's gone. This is the Red Pass area. My wife was not extremely excited about Red Pass, by the way. It's just a gravel road, but it's kind of washboardy and pretty rough, but it does have some tight corners on it, and you get up there to a one-lane road that snakes up a hill, and it's kind of interesting. It's fun. I had fun. The hillsides are covered with mine shafts. I had to, you had to get out and take a look down some of them. I didn't go in them. I wasn't that brave, just being my wife all alone. We figured if somebody got snake bit or something, it'd be a bad deal. This is Leadfield. It's a town that was also fairly successful at one time, had up to 300 people living in it, and all of it's now, of course, just sitting here rotting. And we took a lunch here. We ate here before. No, we didn't. We were going to. We just had a snack instead. And then we decided for lunch later on in the canyon as we go into Titus Canyon. You can see all the structures on the hillsides and stuff in the veins they were mining of the rock. Titus Canyon is a fairly lengthy road from here. Paths and stuff. There's all sorts of petroglyphs in the canyon. That there's actually a spring in there. I think they call it Clare's Spring or something. But there were obviously markings for the natives to get to the spring. Experience what happens to the GoPro when you don't get it snapped in all the way and you take off down the road. And that's what happens to the GoPro. Anyway, as we went through the canyon, I'm really into geology. In fact, I'm kind of known as a rock hound and rock collector most everywhere I go. And it's a national park, and I did not do any rock collecting in the national park because it is illegal to do so. It was just fascinating to look at some of the things. I'll point out some of the things I found as we went along, but is interesting because there was a lot of hardship and death to make this road. At one point, there were up to 30 vehicles a day at one time traveling this road, filled with people, taking them to the mine at Leadfield, back out. It was kind of going to be a new boom town. Of course, there's not much water or anything up here, so it's always fascinating to think about what they had to do to live back here.
13 people died of dehydration building this road in the Nevada desert.
1906 to get to the ghost town of Leadfield that we just came from.
Which wasn't a ghost town at that time.
300 people lived there. You can go.
Notice in some areas of the canyon how deep the gravel is, which just tells you this is not the canyon to be in if there was a flash flood on this side of the park. There's areas where the gravel is 6 feet deep. Average, there's at least 12 inches of gravel, and you can see that when it comes through here, it obviously moves a lot of material around. Not a great place to be in the middle of a storm. For us, fortunately, there was no storms planned while we were here, so. And it wasn't extremely hot. We were actually mid-May when we were starting this area, and so it was sometimes 99, sometimes 85, but there was nobody there. There was nobody in the park. We felt, in fact, over our 4 days in Death Valley that we had the entire national park to ourselves. Anywhere we went to all of these ghost town sites. We went to a lot of sites you're going to see. We didn't see any people anywhere. We were like in the camping. We never had anybody camp with us anywhere. Now, I've heard that it's not always that way, but by May, people abandoned Death Valley for overnight camping and overlanding and such, because it can get really hot. We were just really fortunate in that the weather really cooperated for us. We had great weather while we were in Death Valley. Although four-wheel drive isn't needed for most of this trail, I can see where in certain weather or in certain situations, there's areas where you can see the dirt slides and stuff have covered the road. A four-wheel drive would come in handy, so enable you to progress further. Should be mentioned to you as well that this road is a one-way road, so you have to start on Rhyolite side and go into Death Valley. You're not allowed to come up the road from Death Valley, so you'll have to go out of the park into Nevada and then come back into the park from Rhyolite to use this road. Here you start seeing the walls get a little sharper. The area where the canyon gets really sharp and the road gets really narrow is a relatively short section of Titus Canyon. This area where it starts getting tight is probably only about 2 miles of the whole trail.
This is super cool. We can have lunch here.
Yeah.
Patterns in the rock, often that we see on a small scale in granites and pegmatites, are usually like within a 1/4 inch size would be the largest chips. Those particles of that rock, some of them were the size of 150 pounds that were trapped in that flow in that rock, which is really just a really cool geologic thing to see. mind when you watch these videos that I usually cut out more than 3/4 of the footage that I have. Some people say, well, why do you put as much trail footage in as that you do? Because this is kind of why I make my videos, is to log what it looks like, give you an idea of the different types of terrain you're going to see should you choose to follow this path, the uncrowded path, which this road was very uncrowded on this day. We, in fact, never saw another person after we left Rhyolite. We saw one person in Rhyolite, and we never saw another vehicle all the way through until we hit the main Highway 190 again. In the meantime, we had this entire area to ourselves.
And we are out. Look at that. Whew, that's pretty. What a big view.
There is a beautiful view when you come out of Titus Canyon, and it's a beautiful time to kind of take in the sights of the whole of Death Valley below you. Off in the distance you can see stovepipe wells. We took off and went down because our plan was to go to the other side of the canyon, and so it took us down to what is known as the Devil's Cornfield and Mesquite Flat Sand Dunes, and here's some pictures of some of that before we turned off onto Cottonwood Canyon. Storms and dust devils and all sorts of sand activities going on down there. It was windy today. And the gas prices. And my friend, the Raven. There's warnings on the next road we take. It's on the Cottonwood Road, and it warns you that there is lots of soft sand. You need to be certain that you don't get stuck in it. Now we're heading up towards Cottonwood Canyon. And we are going to go all the way back to the end of what is known as Marble Canyon. Now, most of the day we have not found a place with any shade, but I got a tip from somebody that in the back of Marble Canyon there'll be a place where you can camp in the shade. So that's our goal. We are to go, here's the junction sign there. We are heading back to this spot right here where the canyon walls, there's shade on one side or the other all day long. It was a great place. Even though there wasn't much shade, it soon grew and we had a great place of shade. It was about 77, 78 degrees in our little corner of the woods there, so we had dinner here and had a great night in Marble Canyon. I will say this, nobody came into the canyon. It was absolutely silent. There was no noise in this canyon at all, nothing. If you don't like sleeping in absolute silence, I don't recommend Marble Canyon. There wasn't a breeze, there wasn't wind, nothing. Looking up at night through the cracks up above us, we could see stars passing overhead through a narrow channel of black canyon walls. It was a very neat experience. Early the next morning, we had a busy day, so we headed out Marble Canyon, and you'll see the road. This isn't equal to Titus Canyon Road as far as it probably is almost moderate difficulty in places. There's some really big rocks, really big washouts, areas where four-wheel drive is necessary to move on. I can only imagine after the flood, because you can see already the road was in disrepair, that this road now is probably impassable for quite some time. this canyon goes on and on and on, and it's just a very, very neat place to drive. I highly recommend it if they get the road back up and running. It is also one of the roads that is temporarily closed because of the flooding that happened in late 2022. Being from Montana, we're always looking for wildlife. But one thing you start to see in Death Valley is it's not very supportive of wildlife. There are, I'm sure, in some areas of Death Valley, and we go to visit some of those areas later in this video, where it's very rich. But out here, all you basically find are insects, a few small birds, and a few small bugs and snakes, and there's just not enough water. Some of the lizards out here, in one of the flyers we read, said will probably live their entire life without ever tasting water. That the only water they'll get is from the plants and the animals, the moisture that they get from the insects and such that they eat. Pretty amazing place that way. Go to visit a ghost town back in there and a mine, and then we're going to be camped on the other side of those. It's still in Death Valley tonight.
And it's like 7:30 in the morning, and what temperature is it?
77 degrees. We had a canyon all to ourselves last night.
Totally to ourselves, and we could see the stars. It was so beautiful.
Bats.
Yeah.
Giant moths. It was a neat little place. Not much water, so no other critters. I don't know where the bats get water. As to the question whether or not you have to drive in sand, yeah, there's about 3 miles of sand like this. All sorts of warnings for cars not to come and get stuck in here, because apparently they do.
Oh, big bump.
And then they have to be rescued. We're just keeping a good speed and just cruising over all of them. 2-wheel drive, just hitting them with some speed. Tires aren't deflated very much because honestly, underneath all of this is a solid road. Distance, that's Stovepipe Wells. That's the other, I guess,
civilization.
There's 2+ spots of civilization in the park where you can get gas and pay some water and hotel rooms and
souvenirs if you want them.
A couple souvenir shops, restaurant.
And some groceries a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's a little pricey.
Everything's pricey.
What's the temperature now?
It's 86 down here.
And it is
7:55.
yeah. 20 minutes after we told you it was 77. Up a little higher. Coming out of Marble Canyon. Into the flats. I wonder if the sand is hot yet.
I'm sure the sand's hot.
Leaving the main portion of Death Valley, we got on the highway and went up to go up the Immigrant Trail Road highway, and that eventually we turned off on the Skidoo Road, which takes you up to all the mines around what used to be a ghost town known as Skidoo. Now, Skidoo itself is gone. There's not buildings there, but there's an old mill up there. There's a lot of shafts and mines and mining operations all around in the valleys leading back to it. It's a beautiful trip to go back there, and when you get up to the top, you can actually look off the other side of Death Valley and see Panamint Valley and that whole area, which is really gorgeous to see too. Once you turn off on Aquaberry Point Road, you're going to come across another little ghost town. This ghost town was known as Fredericksville, and it was served the Eureka mine, where actually Aquaberry was the man who owned it, and he developed the trail out to this point to take his visitors out to see what he considered one of the best views in Death Valley. There's still appliances and such in the old buildings here. There's a lot of evidence. It's interesting that the Eureka mine was very successful and had all sorts of gold that was found and had a mill and press and stuff. But just a quarter mile, half a mile away, some of the other mines that were in the area went totally bankrupt without ever getting anything. So it's just kind of funny because of the way the layers are standing in Death Valley. If you get into the right layer, you get into that layer that has gold. If you get into the other layers, you get into layers of basically sedimentary rock and rock that doesn't produce any metals. The famed Goliath lizard. I don't know what he was, but he was big. Aquaberry Point is thousands of feet above the valley floor, and you're looking down on Salt Creek, you're looking down on Furnace Valley, you're looking on, depending upon which side of this point you go to, you can look off in either direction, and it's pretty spectacular views. it might look like you're just driving across rolling hills. And for a while, that might be exactly what you're experiencing, is just to drive in rolling hills. And then you'll turn around a corner and you'll drop into a washout or a canyon, and it'll expose all different colors and styles of rock, glistening in the sun. There'll be micas, there'll be all sorts of different minerals. It's really interesting to see all the different minerals in rocks that are in Death Valley. The donkeys are not native here. They were leftovers from back in the day when everything was hauled in by donkey, all the water and all the supplies. And of course, apparently when some of the mines closed down, the donkeys were let go. And meanwhile, they've learned to forage and make a living here. For those who are unsure what on earth all of these giant kilns would be for, what they would do is they would cut down the trees here in this forest area, and they would throw them in here and set them on fire. After several days, they would be reduced to charcoal, and then the charcoal was used down in the milling process to create a hotter fire to get the ore out of rock. So these kilns, there was several men who would live here and keep the fires going. They had a really small hut back behind here, barely enough, and you can see stumps all over the mountains up there from 100 years ago, where they would mine, where they would lumber trees and use it to create the charcoal in order to produce the ore.
Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above, ye heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
We pulled over at the Thorndike campground, and we had the entire campground to ourselves. There was no one there. So over here we did get to see wildlife. We saw some burros, we saw some quail, and again a whole bunch of different types of lizards, and even a couple of chipmunks and things like that in the pinyon forest on this side of the park. This is the pinyon forest, the singing forest.